Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Weekend at Bakugo's. This will be Part 15, Chapter 16. Izuku was sitting on the floor with the class, and he was frowning seriously at his Uno cards. Bakugo watched him squint at the rest of the circle like they were all engaged in a high-stakes game of poker. He had played his turn, and Kaminari next to him made a regretful noise. "Sorry, mini bro," he said as he put down a reverse card. The rest of the class that were gathered round oohed and hissed at Izuku's bad fortune. "We've really got to get out more." The toddler's mouth twisted, and his head dropped. He heaved a huge sigh before fixing Kaminari with big green puppy dog eyes, cranked up to 100%. Guilt actually flashed across Pikachu's face before Izuku replied quietly, "Yeah, I'm sorry too." He slowly placed his own reverse card down on top of Kaminari's and grinned wickedly. "Dunce face." The class erupted into gales of laughter. Even Kaminari nodded appreciatively at the play. "He's always been competitive," Inko muttered as she lowered her camera again. It had hardly left her hand all afternoon. Bakugo smirked. "Not like I can fucking comment on getting competitive." His mother, however, apparently was more than happy to. "Good God, yes," she laughed. "Katsuki was always bad enough on his own, but when they got together—" Their mother started swapping reminiscences back and forth, getting gigglier with each one. Bakugo tried to tune them out, but couldn't help noticing Aizawa's own smirk as he listened in. Bakugo didn't like it in the slightest. To his relief, his dad finally interrupted. "Oh, but the competitions were nothing compared to the schemes they came up with together. Fucking traitor." "Like when they thought they could make themselves taller," the hag cackled, smacking his dad's leg. "And when we walked in to see Katsuki holding onto one of the legs of his bed," Auntie struggled through her chuckles as Bakugo buried his head in his hands and groaned. "While Izuku pulled on his legs," his dad continued for her, gesturing to Aizawa and Mike, "to try and stretch Katsuki." The moms dissolved into hysterics as his dad chuckled lightly, glancing at his son. "You can divorce your parents, right?" "Is that why you're taller than me, Kacchan?" Bakugo choked on his own spit, and the adults lost it completely. Izuku had appeared at the end of the sofa Bakugo was sitting on and was watching the adults happily. Without thinking, Bakugo sat up straighter, to take his elbows off of his knees and lift up the arm closest to Izuku in invitation. Izuku half ran to his side in his haste to take advantage of the opening. He didn't climb up as Bakugo had expected, though, but instead stood next to him and leaned across his lap. "What am I, a table? Cheeky little fucker." With only a small pout, he settled his arm around Izuku anyway. "Thought you were playing Uno," he mumbled. Izuku shrugged nonchalantly. "Didn't think it was fair on Dunceface and the others." Bakugo huffed a laugh before asking, "Why, because you're the ultimate at Uno now?" Izuku's grin was blinding. "Of course, Kacchan. Not just now, always." "I'm not proud. Nope, not at all." "Those are big words for someone so tiny," he deadpanned back. He heard his mother snort into her soda. Izuku gasped, apparently affronted. "Rude, Kacchan!" Izuku poked him in the chest, his eyes alight with amusement. "When I'm big again—" "You'll what, kick me in the ankles?" Bakugo jabbed Izuku in the side, where he knew Izuku was ticklish. "I'm still taller than you, little nerd." Izuku crossed his arms dramatically and turned his head away from Bakugo, nose in the air. "Guess we didn't stretch you enough, huh?" Izuku's head snapped back around, and he slapped Bakugo's leg as he hissed, "Shh! Kacchan! Mom doesn't know we stretch me too." Bakugo gave a strangled sort of choke that he tried to clear with a gruff throat clear. Shit, no, they did not know that. They just presumed they'd caught us on our first go, but Izuku had insisted on going first. Would they still be mad? Why do I even care? They looked at each other with wide eyes. Because Izuku cares. They swallowed before turning to their parents and teachers. All the adults wore identical expressions caught somewhere between shock and hilarity. Auntie broke first. Oh, your faces," she chortled merrily, clutching at Aizawa's arm, who startled at the contact. "You both looked so guilty," his dad laughed as he patted the hag on the back to stop her choking. "It's been over a decade. I think you're fine, boys." Bakugo felt Izuku soften as he puffed out a breath of relief. A great shout went up then from the class. "What do you mean you've got no cards left?" Sero yelled. "When did that happen?" About 3 turns ago, Todoroki answered placidly to resounding groans. Sero's eye twitched, and he took a deep breath. Did you say Uno? Todoroki's expression of polite amusement fell into a frown. Was I supposed to? Kaminari started to choke on his snacks. Has no one ever told Toto the rules? Whispered Izuku as he finally made his way onto Bakugo's lap for a better view of the chaos. Not a clue, he answered honestly. I'm sure they did, Aizawa mumbled. Then he added, smiling. And I'm not convinced that Todoroki doesn't remember the rules perfectly. If he didn't say Uno, it doesn't count anyway, exclaimed Mike as he glanced at his watch. Sho, I'm going to take our little listener back. Aizawa nodded, and they all looked at where Eri was curled up like a cat on a pile of pillows. Everyone in the class had fetched her one as soon as her eyelids had begun to droop. I'll be along in a bit. Bakugo almost missed the brief touch of Mike's hand to Aizawa's shoulder, subtle but sure, before Eri was gathered up and they headed for the door. The class waved and whispered goodbyes and goodnights as the two slipped out into the rapidly darkening evening. So what happens tomorrow? Auntie asked Aizawa quietly. He heaved a sigh before answering. The principal wants to know as soon as Midoriya changes back. Turning to Bakugo and Izuku, he continued. So would I, for that matter. You've got my number, so let me know and we'll go to the principal together. It probably goes without saying, but you'll be exempt from attending lessons until Midoriya changes back. But we may have to work out a way of making sure you don't fall behind. Bakugo nodded. A sudden thrill of nerves made him shiver slightly. Only Izuku noticed, and he started to rub Bakugo's bare arms. You should put a jacket on if you're cold, Kacchan. The nerves only intensified as he watched the little boy in his lap. What the fuck does happen tomorrow? You'll let me know too, Katsuki. Auntie's voice brought him back sharply. Huh? He said a little stupidly. Yeah, of course I will. Or Izuku will, chimed his dad. Yeah, I suppose you'll lose your ability to work a phone again after he's back to normal. The hag grinned at him and ruffled Izuku's hair. Bakugo could only grit his teeth at her, while the others chuckled good-naturedly. The evening had fallen proper when Masaru lightly slapped his knees and announced with a sigh that they should probably make a move. As soon as Masaru stood up, Izuku wanted up too, and so with a dramatic groan, his dad lifted the toddler off of his son's lap. I'll go and pick up our coats from the other room, he said before wandering out with Izuku jabbering his ear. Bakugo helped Auntie pack up the leftovers and wedge it all into the fridge. Several of the class had offered, but Auntie and his mom had insisted on tidying, as the class had made everything in the first place. Did All Might get any cake? The hag asked, as she wrapped 3 pieces in napkins before surrendering them to the depths of her handbag. Bakugo caught Auntie's eye and raised an eyebrow at her in question. While his own mother missed the look, she heard Auntie let out a very Izuku-like squeak. She whipped around just in time to see Auntie bury her beet-red face in her hands when she realized she'd been seen sneaking out earlier. Bakugo's stomach dropped. Fuck. Inko! Mitsuki gasped. What aren't you telling me? Auntie's head popped back up, and she waved her hands, rambling rapidly in flustered denial. It's like I'm looking at Izuku in a cardigan. There's nothing to tell, Mitsuki. Sure there isn't. Mitsuki only cackled as she nudged the other with an elbow. It's a long drive back, Inko, she wheedled. Auntie's face screwed up in the first show of frustration Bakugo remembered ever seeing from her. His mother wasn't fazed as they stared each other down in Class 2A's kitchen. Auntie's shoulders dropped slightly, and his mother's Cheshire grin was back. I rue the day I ever met you, Bakugo Mitsuki, Auntie hissed with narrowed eyes. Bakugo took a step back as she stalked past, and he was very relieved to see that she was smiling. Love you too, dear, the hag sang over her shoulder at Auntie's, retreating back. She saw her son's face then. She would have told me eventually, Brat, don't worry about it. Would she? He couldn't help the questioning surprise in his tone. His mother rolled her eyes at him. I didn't stop being Inko's friend just because you stopped being Izuku's. Ouch. Contrary to popular belief, the world does not actually revolve around you two, she said bluntly. Say how you feel, Mom, jeez. I can't say we didn't drift a little, and that you pair didn't make it bloody difficult at times, but we never lost touch completely. More quietly, she added. It's nice to have her back. They hung back a little to watch Inko and Masaru swing Izuku between them. Mitsuki sighed. What? He grumbled. Whatever does happen tomorrow, his mom looked at him with something that could be considered affection in her eyes. Don't fuck it up. Tch. He's a good one. He deserves the best. I know that, he started angrily. Look, I don't know why, but the good ones find people like us. She gestured between them. And make us want to be better. Be the best we can be, for them. His mother was speaking softer than he'd ever heard her, and he followed her gaze to find she was looking not at Izuku, but at his dad. Mom, Bakugo had no idea what he was going to say. This was entirely new territory for them, so he ducked his head instead. You would be unstoppable on the same team. She put a hand on his cheek to make him meet her matching red gaze. Trust me when I say, there is not a better partner than one that understands what's going on in here. She tapped him between the eyes. And in here. She poked him in the chest. Bakugo didn't trust himself to speak, so he just nodded. She smiled before pulling him into a hug. I don't say it enough, but I'm so proud of you, Kitty, she whispered. He just squeezed her back and hoped she understood. One more thing, though. She let him go and stepped back. If Izuku is anything like your father, you're going to need to be real clear. The softness had vanished from her voice, and Bakugo had the feeling that their delicate moment was about to be pulverized. What do you... He dared to start. I could have worn nothing but a gift tag with his name on, and he still wouldn't have cottoned on, she hollered gleefully as she walked to the others. Mom, Jesus Christ! He forced the heels of his hands into his eyes. Can you bleach a brain? I was trying to be a gentleman, he heard his dad protest. You were clueless, his mother goaded. Masaru shook his head and smiled. I got there in the end. He held his hand out to her. Got everything? His mom took it before saying yes. Inko? He asked. Yes, I'm ready. Then they all looked down at Izuku, who was frowning hard at the floor. Bakugo crouched down. Time to say goodbye, buddy, he whispered. This was always going to go spectacularly badly. He's got to be so tired by now, too. Izuku shook his head stubbornly. Bakugo's eyes flicked to Inko, and he saw her hand twitch. He could see that she desperately wanted to scoop up her son, but knew it would only make things worse in this moment. His parents pulled her between them, and they each held one of her hands. Bakugo poked Izuku's side. You can see everyone again in a few days. Izuku's feet shuffled, and he peeked out from behind the curl curtain. Promise? Yeah, Bakugo nodded. We can go together if you like. Izuku sniffed and rubbed at his eyes. Okay, he mumbled. He hugged everyone tightly, and Auntie got butterfly kisses and extra squeezes. He even hugged Aizawa, who had been hovering in the background to give the family space, but ready to escort the visitors back to the main exit. Izuku's lip was trembling when he held his arms up to Bakugo. The sniffle started as he tucked his head into Bakugo's neck when they stood in the doorway and waved their parents into the dark. The tears came when Bakugo shut the door behind him. They made it all the way to the corridor leading to the dorm rooms before heartbreaking sobs racked Izuku's body. I miss them already, Izuku hiccuped into Bakugo's shoulder. I know. It's okay to be sad. Bakugo tightened his arms around Izuku while he cried. They had nowhere to be. They could just walk until Izuku settled. I got you, Bakugo muttered, into green curls. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 16 of Weekend at Bakugo's. Chapter 17 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you so much for listening.